Hello everyone, I'm Travis, and let's get wanderlost. This video is going to be the last video of our Symphony of the Seas Mediterranean Cruise trip recap. In the previous videos of this series, we've gone over our trip to Barcelona, Spain, embarkation day, our days in Palma de Mallorca, Marseille, France, the spectacular Cinque Terre, which was part of La Spezia, Italy, our day in Rome, where we attempted to do some things that we didn't do the first time in Rome, and our port of Naples, Italy, where we had the breathtaking excursion to the Amalfi Coast. In this video, we're going to go over everything else that happened on our 7-night Mediterranean cruise aboard Symphony of the Seas. This is going to include the recaps of some of the food we ate, the shows we watched, and other activities that we went to aboard this amazing Royal Caribbean ship. We're also going to give a review of our thoughts overall of Symphony of the Seas, and then talk about our trip home and our last day in Barcelona. Let's start off by talking about the food in the main dining room. We mostly ate in the main dining room on this trip aboard Symphony of the Seas. Overall, the food was pretty good. Obviously, the food in the main dining room is not as good as some of the specialty restaurants or even Coastal Kitchen, and some of the themed nights are better than others. We didn't have much to complain about inside the main dining room. Overall, each meal that we ordered was good. We didn't get the ultimate dining package on this cruise, which is something we typically recommend aboard Oasis-class ships. The itinerary that we had for this Mediterranean cruise was very port-heavy with 5 ports in 5 days. We didn't feel that we would get our money's worth out of the ultimate dining package, and the food and service in the main dining room didn't make us regret that decision. Our main waiter's name was Ashok, and he was amazing and made sure that he remembered each one of our preferences every night of our cruise. The only downside or only bad experience we had during the entire 7 nights was when we asked to sit closer to a window. Since this window table was further away from the kitchen, the service was incredibly slow and took close to 2 hours. The next day, we just went back to our normal table and decided not to do that again. But beyond that, the main dining room was really good, and we'd definitely make the same decision again on our next cruise. Now let's talk about the Windjammer, which on Royal Caribbean ships is the buffet. We're normally really big fans of the Windjammer and the buffet aboard Royal Caribbean ships. Unfortunately, on this trip, the Windjammer didn't live up to our hype. The few times that we ate in the Windjammer, the food was just okay, not great, and the worst part about the Windjammer was the wait just to find a table. From our experience on the Oasis-class ships like Symphony, Harmony, and Oasis, it's really hard to find a table in the Windjammer because there's so many people, and the size of the Windjammer is just not big enough. This is something they fixed on Wonder of the Seas by lowering it a deck or two and making it twice as big. I hate having to pull out a spyglass to find a table when you have food in your hands, so we just kind of avoided the Windjammer after a couple days. Some of the other passengers made the Windjammer unbearable, like the gentleman who proudly yelled, "I don't need to wash my hands, I washed them earlier." That's just gross. So in our experience, the Windjammer definitely could have been better. Now we're going to talk about some of the activities that we participated or watched on board Symphony of the Seas. First off, I want to say that this itinerary was very port-heavy, which meant 5 ports in 5 days. And each port, you were spending a ton of time in the port exploring and doing activities. Which means when you get back to the ship, it's either really late, it's time for dinner, you have time for a show, and then you gotta go to bed, just to be able to get up and do it all over again. So honestly, beyond some of the main shows, like Flight and Hairspray and the Aqua Theater shows and stuff, we didn't really do a whole lot of activities like bingo and trivia and the things that we would normally do on a Royal Caribbean cruise. We did check out the parade that they do in the promenade. I think it was on the last day of the cruise. We watched people do ice skating, and of course we went to the Love and Marriage show, which is one of our favorites. Unfortunately, they didn't do Crazy Quest. I think it's because it was a European itinerary. But overall, what we did partake in was actually pretty fun and enjoyable. We didn't get to do everything that an Oasis-class ship has to offer, but we did get to explore some really cool European ports, so I guess it's a trade-off. We still had a great time. We mentioned on our embarkation video that Hairspray, the main Broadway show on Symphony of the Seas, was really good. The second main stage show that they put on is a show called Flight. This show goes through the history of flight and some of the main milestones in history around flight, like the moon landing, the Wright brothers, that sort of thing. The props on this show are really good, especially the very last scene about the Wright brothers. We highly recommend you check it out. We stayed for the entire thing. It was excellent. Besides the Aqua Theater show Hero, they actually have a show called Aqua Nation. Unfortunately, we didn't get to check this out because on the days that they were going to perform it, the seas were really bad, as you can tell in this video, watching the water in the pool. So both times they canceled it and we didn't get to see it. But the safety of the performers is super important, we agree. We'll just check it next time we're on Symphony. Symphony of the Seas also has 2 ice skating shows. The first one, which we showed on one of our earlier videos, is called 1976, and it's kind of a time-traveling story. The second is Symphony's version of Ice Skate, which is actually a show on just about every Royal Caribbean ship that has an ice skating rink, just a little bit different with some new music. This show is different from the first show because it's a little bit more about the music rather than a story, and the skaters usually go a little bit more all out during the ice skate performances. We never miss ice skate on any of the Royal Caribbean ships we go on. We highly recommend you check it out as well. Alright, we talked about food and activities and shows. Let's do our overall review of Symphony of the Seas. I would rate Symphony of the Seas as our 3rd or 4th favorite Royal Caribbean ship. And if you're keeping track at home, number 1 is Wonder of the Seas, number 2 is Odyssey, and then number 3 or 4 is kind of like a tie between Navigator and Symphony. Overall, Symphony is a beautiful ship with a ton of activities, a ton of stuff to do, and overall, some really good food to enjoy. Royal Caribbean just about always makes little improvements as they continue through a class of ships, and Symphony of the Seas definitely has some slight improvements over its predecessor in Harmony of the Seas. There's some little things like how small the Royal Caribbean logo shop is, or how unenjoyable the Windjammer Marketplace is, but overall Symphony is an excellent ship, and it shouldn't feel bad that it's number 3 or number 4 on our list of our favorite Royal Caribbean ships. Now let's rank the itinerary that we took on this 7-night Mediterranean cruise. The 4th and 5th best ports on this cruise are probably ports that you probably want to do an excursion on. First, Marseille, France, which the downtown area has a ton of shopping, but it's kind of whatever. And Palma de Mallorca, which has the amazing church and the shopping district, but maybe there's some other things out there that'll make it a better port than what we thought it was. I like Rome a lot. It's one of my favorite places on the planet, but I think it's better as a home port so you have more time to explore the city than as a cruise port because it's so far away from the actual port that Royal Caribbean uses. You gotta take a bus from the port to the train station, an hour-long train ride to the actual city. By then you've just wasted a little bit of your time in just getting to the port, and then you gotta scamper around the city to see everything you want to see. Definitely makes a better home port than an actual cruise port. But good news on this actual itinerary, you can actually use Rome as a home port rather than Barcelona. Make sure you contact a travel agent to find out how. La Spezia was our second favorite port because we got to go to Cinque Terre. This national park is just amazing. Highly recommend you check out our video and definitely take an excursion over to this amazing place. And our favorite port on this cruise was Naples, Italy, because our excursion to the Amalfi Coast was the best excursion that we've ever paid for. definitely recommend going to Amalfi. It was by far the best part of this cruise. It was unbelievable. So that wraps up our 7-night Mediterranean cruise aboard Symphony of the Seas. This trip that we didn't really spend a whole lot of time planning was simply spectacular. One of our more favorite trips that we've ever taken, and a great way to spend my 40th birthday and our anniversary. If you're looking to take a Mediterranean cruise with a Royal Caribbean, we definitely recommend it, especially with Oasis going over there next year. Now let's talk about what we did in our final day in Barcelona before we flew home. Our day in Barcelona after the cruise was actually the same day as the Barcelona Marathon. This made getting to our hotel and around the city on the first part of the day kind of a nightmare because the Ubers and taxis kept canceling on us, and then we had to play Frogger just to get to the center part of the city. Beyond all the closed streets and the runners, we did make our way over to the Arc de Triomphe to kind of check that area out, including the park area around it. This was a main area for the marathon where they actually had drummers and people motivating runners to, I guess, run faster. After leaving the Arc, we walked all the way over to the Barcelona Cathedral and checked out that entire area. I absolutely love the Gothic style architecture of the Gothic Quarter and this cathedral in general. Really amazing thing to check out. Definitely recommend going there. Inside the cathedral, there was some really amazing artwork that was just awe-inspiring, and some really cool architecture that is definitely worth taking a look at. There was even a candle vending machine, which I had never seen before. Actually really funny and kind of cool at the same time. Inside the cathedral, there's also an area with a lot of ducks in it. I was not expecting this inside the cathedral. Definitely spent some time just kind of checking them out. After the cathedral, we went to Güell Palace. Güell Palace was designed by Antoni Gaudí back in 1888 for a, I guess, very rich person by the name of Eusebi Güell. Admission cost about 12 euros, and if you like architecture and art, especially the art from Antoni Gaudí, definitely check out Güell Palace. It was actually a really cool place to visit. I wasn't expecting to like it. We spent a lot of time here before we could actually check into our hotel. There's a ton of different rooms and different types of architecture to see. I'd put it on our recommend list if you're inside the city of Barcelona. They also have tickets so you can actually check out Güell Park as well. Unfortunately, by the time we got up to Güell Park, they had sold out all of their admission tickets for the day, so then we had to take an Uber back into the city. But overall, Güell Palace was very enjoyable, and our favorite restaurant in Barcelona, Güell Tapas, is right down the street. This seagull just thinks he's the king of the castle, apparently. He definitely had the best view of the city of Barcelona. After we left Güell Palace, we went to lunch at Miku Maku, which is a restaurant over in the Gothic Quarter area. They specialize in your tapas and other Barcelona-style food. It was pretty good, not as good as Güell Tapas, but definitely worth a check out if you're in the area. Now it was finally time to check into our hotel, and on this instance we were staying at the Hotel Jazz, which was a little bit north of where we stayed last time. The Hotel Jazz looked like a hotel that was recently updated. It had some really good amenities in the room, but it didn't look like they were spending much time on general maintenance of the hotel, so there were some things that were actually worn down and not in the greatest quality. The bed was comfortable and the hotel was near everything, but the Inside Inn Apollo that we stayed in before the cruise was definitely better. After checking into the hotel, we took a Uber over to the Sagrada Familia Cathedral, which was on our absolutely must-do list for the city of Barcelona. Sagrada Familia is a Catholic church also designed by Antoni Gaudí, and it's been under construction for 140 years. It's also of that Gothic revival style architecture, and it is just spectacular to look at. We didn't go inside because we didn't have time, but it was definitely an awe-inspiring experience, and next time we're going to check out inside. Finally, we decided to go back to the restaurant that we really enjoyed at the beginning of our trip to Barcelona, Güell Tapa. We had some of our favorite tapas on this trip to this restaurant, but we tried something different at the very end, which was to try one of the paellas, which it was really good. Definitely recommend it in this restaurant. As a side note, for getting around the city of Barcelona, we decided to use Ubers and taxis. And I don't know if it was because of the marathon or just because how Uber works there, we kept getting canceled almost the entire trip. So I don't know of a way around that, maybe just walking, but that was a huge downside of going to Barcelona. So that was our trip, a 7-night Mediterranean cruise aboard Symphony of the Seas and a few days in Barcelona. It was unbelievable and one of our favorite trips we've taken. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. And as always, make sure you like and subscribe.